The death toll has risen to 35 and authorities have warned it could increase as some victims are seriously injured. The United Nations has condemned the attack, which took place on Tuesday night. The first bomb exploded outside the mosque as worshippers were leaving after evening prayers. 15 minutes later, a car parked across the street exploded. Many security and health officials who had rushed to assist the victims of the first blast were killed in the second. No group has claimed responsibility as yet. Libya has been rocked by instability for years now as rival governments vie for control. It's left the country vulnerable to several terror organizations. Well, let's get you the latest now in Benghazi. From Benghazi on that attack, I'm joined by CGTN's Adel Mahroui. He's joining me live from Cairo in Egypt. Adel, the number of casualties has been rising. What's the latest on that front?
Well, as you said, about 35 have been killed and about double that number injured so far. The numbers are expected to increase. Many are still in critical condition. The main attack, or the bigger attack, was actually in the second bomb that was detonated, as you've mentioned, about 10 to 15 minutes after the first bomb, and where the area was packed with civilians who rushed to help, with aid workers, when security officials as well who went there to investigate and secure the vicinity of the area. As witnesses explained, the second bomb was much bigger. It had a much stronger sound and impact on the ground itself. It comes to interrupt a relatively calm environment in Benghazi. Benghazi was the scene of violent attacks and extreme war against militant extremist groups like ISIL and others. And for several months, the Libyan National Army, led by Khalifa Haftar, have maintained security there and have announced it as a militant-free zone. And since then, it has been more or less stable. Now, this comes as a challenge to the eastern authorities who maintain security in Benghazi, and also a challenge to the notion that the Libyan National Army has wiped out extremist groups from Benghazi at least. But it seems that the threat is still continuing, and already people are pointing fingers from both the eastern and western sides on who is behind such an attack.
Well, that is the question, though, because no one has claimed responsibility as yet. Have preliminary investigations given any indication of which group may be responsible for this act?
Not yet. They are trying to reach some leads. As you've said, no one has claimed responsibility. And on the other hand, both the Eastern powers and the Western powers are blaming the other, whether it's on the lack of security grip in the area, or even when it comes to some officials from the Eastern government who blamed the Western powers directly, and also accusing some countries that supports the Western powers, like, for example, Qatar has been brought in by some claims. Of course, there are no evidence yet. There is nothing concrete to indicate who has conducted such an attack. And unless there is a clear statement from any group claiming responsibility, it might be very difficult to predict.
Well, is it still practical now, though, given the events of these past few days? Is it still practical for Libya to hold elections later this year as planned?
That's a big question, and it remains a big question. It's why many analysts have been warning against running and rushing with the elections while security seems to be volatile. Some have already said that such an attack may be or its aim or purpose is to interrupt that set. But what is clear on the ground is that groups like ISIL have been targeting to find a strong foothold in Libya, especially after they've been driven away from Syria and Iraq. And they have been having some bases in the southern part of Libya. The borders at the south and the southwest of Libya remain to be extremely volatile. There's a very huge gap in terms of security. Libya remains a connector to extremist groups from Nigeria to Somalia through the African Sahara. And all of that is, of course, a big challenge. This clear breach into and out from the Libyan borders will threaten the political process, and also add to that the political instability and the division that still remains between the Libyan factions in the east and west. They cannot even agree on a unified way to hold the elections or to conduct the process. So it seems that there are many factors that interrupts and may not make the claims or the hopes to hold the elections successful.